up a dive. Feel the vibe, get ready to ignite. Untold stories in the airways, flying through the night. Experience voices, tales so bold. Streaming live, the truth unfolds. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, so I remember I share and subscribe. Join the side where truth can't hide. Aliens in the attic, UFOs in the sky. Cryptids lurking, oh my, oh my. Ghosts in the hallway, whispering your name. The paranormal, the unexplained. Become a VIP, get the inside scoop. Unlock the mysteries, be part of the group. Live streaming stories, they're talking to you. Super chats buzzing, join the crew. Untold Radio Network, where secrets come alive. New episodes daily, the mysteries thrive. Great guests, super chat, it's a wild member. Share and subscribe, join the side where truth can hide. So if you've got the guts and you want to explore, tune into the Untold, it's what you're looking for. From aliens to ghosts and all that's unseen. Untold Radio Network, where the world's mysteries convene.
The paranormal, UFOs, monsters, mysteries. You're listening to Talking Weird. And now, from a cabin deep in the Northwoods, your host, Dr. Dean Bertram.
Greetings, all my fellow weirdos and weirdettes. Welcome to Talking Weird on the Untold Radio Network. I'm your host, Dean Bertram, and I'm delighted to be back this week, actually. In the history of doing the show, I'd never missed, I don't think, an episode. I had maybe a host or two stand in for me, and I'd planned to do a pre-record last week, and it didn't happen. And then this time last week, I was at the opening night of Midwest Weird Fest and a Night Horror International Film Festival, so I was unable to be with you. Thanks for returning to join me this week, whether you're watching live when we go out on X and on Facebook and of course on YouTube, or you're watching and listening to the show archived on one of those sites after the Thursday Night Live, or perhaps you're listening to us on one of the many podcast platforms that both Talking Weird and all the other shows of the Untold Radio Network go onto. They drop, probably like mine drops the following day. Most shows, I think, drop the day they go live. Anyway, I'm very grateful that you're here. Welcome. I'm also really grateful for my guest actually today, because I'm still in the totally drowning in wrap-up festival work, and I'm still, as you can probably hear from my voice, a little croaky from the great hectic pace of the festival, which was an incredible lot of fun, as it always is, in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. If you've never been along, next year I suggest you check us out. We're always the first or sometimes the second weekend in March. Come along. It's a heck of a fun time. But tonight's guest is a good friend of mine. I know he's going to make my job easy tonight, which I need because he's such a great storyteller. He's an author, a speaker, researcher, and explorer, celebrated for his deep dive into the rich folklore of Wisconsin. As the creator of Badgerland Legends and co-host of the Wisconsin Legends podcast, he brings a unique blend of storytelling and investigation to the mysteries of the Badger State. His engaging presentations have earned him invitations to speak at paranormal conferences, and I saw him speaking a couple of years ago at Milwaukee Paracon, and his presentation was just first class. It was Mickey Mouse. It was excellent. And also he gets invited to speak at banquets and festivals and conventions, where he captivates audiences with tales of the unknown, forgotten history, and local legends. And his most recent book, I believe it's his most recent, I can ask him when he comes on, it's Wisconsin Legends for Kids. My daughter loves it. My girlfriend's daughter loves it. My girlfriend's daughter's best friend also has a copy. I think she loves it also. It's an incredible book, and if you have kids that have any interest in the paranormal or weird things or, cryptids, it's a very cool introductory kind of book for them, and maybe go and check it out. There'll be a link to that book in the show notes where you can go over and get it on Amazon, of course. At any rate, I'm just delighted to welcome back to Talking Weird my good friend, Jeff Finup.
Greetings,
Jeff.
Dean. Thanks for having me again.
Man, I'm always grateful to have you. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, and I just realized today that this is my 5th appearance on Talking Weird.
Gosh.
So I am expecting that velvet smoker's jacket coming in the mail shortly. So I hope you get that on the way.
I better get, or maybe a Hui hat with like your initials on the side of it or something.
That would be fun.
Maybe that's what I should start doing. It is always fun to get merch. We sold merch at the festival this year, and I think it pretty much sold out, which was nice. It's always rewarding to see people grab t-shirts and the like. In fact, one of my favorite t-shirts and one of my girlfriend's favorite t-shirts, and we have matching ones, and sometimes we don't even coordinate and we're both wearing them, which is hilarious, is your Badgerland Legends t-shirt, which we bought from you at Milwaukee Paracon.
Now, those are specially printed in a haunted screen printing shop in downtown Sun Prairie, Wisconsin.
Well,
yeah, my friend John and Renee, they run a little outfit called Razor Sharp Screen Printing in Wisconsin Apparel Company. It's right on the main drag in a historic building that was operated as a furniture store and funeral home. So they sold caskets as well as furnitures, and they also did the viewings of bodies there too. So kind of a one-stop shop for the living and the dead.
Indeed, and probably that's why that t-shirt feels so energized. Who knows what strange attachments we brought home with us.
And I will tell you, Chad Lewis also got his printed there, and I passed along the Chad Lewis t-shirt to my wife, and she wears it as a nightshirt. So I get to accuse her weekly of sleeping with Chad again.
I have a question from somebody I might throw to you straight away, and that's Weird Wisconsin by the look of it. When are we getting new episodes of the podcast, Jeff?
That's our friend Josh Hughes, actually. Weird Wisconsin
Josh
is his new project on Instagram. I highly recommend giving that a follow as well as Waukesha Ghosts.
We played one of his films at the festival this year.
Oh, that's right. Yes. And I got to view that ahead of time, and hopefully that was received well. As far as Wisconsin Legends podcast, it's something that we have, both me and Mike Huberty started that about 4 or 5 years ago. We did a bunch of evergreen episodes, and then we kind of got busy, and it's kind of fallen to the wayside by now. I've always wanted to revive it, so more prodding from people like Josh would be welcome to get that project back on track.
No, I enjoyed it too. I was very grateful that you had me on as a guest at one stage as well, which was fun to talk about Ray Palmer.
Yeah, we you were in the Wisconsin UFOs episode. We did 2 episodes on that. And then through all of our research and everything weird that we dug up about Wisconsin, we forgot to mention the man who invented flying saucers, Raymond A. Palmer, right there in Amherst, hanging out with Richard Shaver. So I had to, before I put out that episode, have an addendum by Dr. Dean explaining kind of the mythos of Ray Palmer and Richard Shaver, and kind of the adventures that they went on right there in the backwoods of Wisconsin, not too far from where I grew up and not too far from where Dean is sitting right now.
Yeah, indeed. And speaking of Wisconsin and Palmer, I should do a little plug very quickly for the next screening of the Shaver Mystery. Well, I will also be talking about the mystery after the mystery, which I like to call the Shaver Mystery Part 2, because it didn't stop after its very successful and controversial run in Amazing Stories. And that's the Contact Modalities Expo, May 1st to 3rd in Delavan, Wisconsin. And you can probably just, YouTube search or not YouTube, sorry, like Facebook search, or just Google search Contact Modalities info. But there it is up on screen. If anybody's looking at it as something they can scan, there's a little scan point they can, use their smartphone to grab if you're watching on a television or laptop. And I think it takes you through, and you get a discount code if you use my name, Dean, or capitalize DEAN. So I'm looking forward to presenting that again. It might be one of the final screenings of that short film. It marks almost the 2-year anniversary when we started screening at festivals. There
Yeah,
might be
had a
one or
great
two more.
run.
Oh man, I'm so grateful. An amazing run with this film.
Yeah, and I can't wait for the full-length feature when you finally get to wrap on that.
It's getting there. I think this summer we have one very big trip to the West Coast. We've already done trips to the East Coast and the West Coast. I think this will be the final trip to the West Coast, and there's another very important local interview I need to try to lock down, and a couple of other local interviews, and then it's almost done. I mean, I have over an 80-minute cut already. By the time I shoot all of this, it'll probably be a 2-hour cut, and then I'll trim it down to 90-something minutes. I don't need it to be much longer than that. I think it's more entertaining a film when it's, snappier rather than when it drags out too much.
Yeah, definitely.
And you're speaking at a conference coming up soon as well, right?
Yeah,
Did you want to give that a plug?
I'll be at the CAPS conference in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin. Pardon me for not remembering the exact date. Do you happen to have it handy? If not, I can
You
look
know
it
what?
up.
If you want to chat a little bit about that, I'll pull it up right now.
Yeah, so that is the Wisconsin CAPS conference. It's fellow co-host or fellow host on the Untold Radio Network, Barnaby Jones. It's his conference. He's been doing it for a couple of years now, and he asked me to put together a CE5 panel, or at least moderate it. He was able to get some great guests, including Zach Screed, who has been kind of diving into this new CE5 modality of contacting. I'm not sure exactly what they're contacting, so I guess I'm going to get to the panel. I'm going to kind of keep an open mind on that to really find out what exactly the process is for the CE5 and what he thinks he's actually getting in contact with through that new modality.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting, all of that stuff. It's Saturday, May 9th at the Radisson Hotel
Thank you.
and Conference Center, which is in Rolling Meadows Drive in Fond du Lac. So that's just like the weekend after Contact Modalities. People can make both of them.
Yeah, they're actually not too far from each other,
Yeah.
both on the east side of the state. And as you know, with Wisconsin, there's always something weird going on. So I believe, yeah, we have the contact modalities, we have Barnaby's conference, and then the following weekend is the Hodag Heritage Festival in Rhinelander. So
I got to get every year. I tell you, I'm going to get.
I know, and we just get so booked. And I know you just came back from your conference or your Midwest Weird Fest, your film festival, and I know that's something I've always wanted to go to, but just the dates have never lined up. And I want to get up to Eau Claire, place that I haven't spent a lot of time in Wisconsin, and check that place out, as well as check out all the films that you're able to bring to a wider audience.
Oh, thank you. I think you'd like it. I think everybody who comes obviously have a great time at the festival, and I think the Mycon Cinema downtown is amazing. And I would like to think my programming is amazing, and a bunch of filmmakers coming, which is amazing. But the town of Eau Claire itself, particularly the downtown area, is gorgeous. I was only talking to my girlfriend Sam the other day and saying, if I didn't have a child and I didn't want to live in the boondocks, and take her away from all the nature and the gardening and everything she loves, I could very happily, if I was like a single man or a man without a child, I could live in the downtown area in Eau Claire and I would be in my element. It's just cool and hip, and there's all kinds of bars and restaurants.
It's a college town.
Arts events. It's a total college town, and the downtown area is probably, I think it's the prettiest city downtown area I've been in big town that I've been in Wisconsin. Not that I know the whole state, but when I think of all the places I've seen in Wisconsin, as far as a city urban environment goes, downtown Eau Claire's magic. It's so gorgeous.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk about Wisconsin a little tonight. I know you were going to share with me and our audience some fantastic Fortean phenomena that has taken place in the state.
I love the alliteration there, Dean.
Expert on Wisconsin weirdness, Jeff.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but I definitely have really dug in and found some fun cases. And no podcast would be complete without already mentioned Chad Lewis, but his book, Hidden Headlines of Wisconsin, right here, I got a copy.
Cool.
He kind of, in the vein of the original Charles Fort, dug into the archives and pulled out a lot of these crazy headlines from around the state. And I think he has a few other states that he's done this with as well.
Chad's fantastic. I love him so much.
the fun newspaper clippings and compile them into that. And that's kind of what Charles Fort did in the early 1900s. He went on a search for what he called damned data, or data that didn't really line up with the scientific consensus of the day. And for that, he called it damned data. So um, I prepared a little slideshow here,
Oh,
and
fantastic.
only a few slides here. Let's see if I can pull it up. All right. Can you see our hero, Mr. Fort?
I sure can. I'll add it to the stage. There we go.
Okay.
That's a great shot or a great image.
Yeah, I'll go back to that. Just kind of the fish falls and the frogs and the old hag and some of the anomalous airship
Aircraft.
sightings of
Yeah.
the time, all kind
Yeah.
of emblazoned on that slide. Well, anyways, I wanted to maybe put together just a few of these things that are kind of overlooked in this world. And I would put these directly in that Fortean category because they're not really like paranormal, like ghost encounters. They're not Bigfoots or cryptids or something that you would call like UFOs or UAPs would be the modern day, but just weird things that happened that really didn't have an explanation. So the first one you'll see is this beautiful earthworm sitting on a bench. Well, April showers are said to bring Mayflowers, but in 1897, a small Jefferson County, Wisconsin community received more than just flowers after its overnight rain. On a morning of April 1897, stunned residents of Palmyra awoke to quite the surprise. Strange worms were found atop and inside of every imaginable surface. The worms weren't just confined to the ground or sidewalks, a common occurrence after a spring shower. It seemed like they had fallen from the sky. So, how did a worm not recognized as a native to Wisconsin end up in Palmyra? We're not really sure, but it said that the fishermen of the community were quick to forget the source of the mysterious blessings. Instead, they were happy to angle with a worm that was particularly attractive to the local trout. And the specific worm that was discovered was called a gilt worm, and they were known to be native to Ireland. So, how did this Irish worm end up in Wisconsin? Well, we really can't say, and that's what makes it this Fortean phenomenon.
That's fascinating. And one of the things that interested me most about that tale was that you said they fell on the town of Palmyra, and Palmyra is one of those words or names that I don't know if Kill mentioned that town, but it's certainly one of them when he talks about the name game. There are some
Hmm.
towns and surnames that seem to attract the paranormal, and Palmyra is one of them. There's a very famous dogman attack siege from a town called Palmyra, not the town in Wisconsin. There's multiple Palmyra stories. I think in one of Linda Godfrey's books, there's another Palmyra story. They're all over the place. Palmyra, for some reason, if people want to Google, I don't know, Palmyra Fortean or Palmyra cryptid or Palmyra dogman or Palmyra hauntings, the amount of strange stuff associated with towns named Palmyra is very, very weird.
Yeah, I think Lauren Coleman called this name game. He called it the Fayette or Lafayette effect, where
Right.
everything with Fayette in the name, the Marquis de Lafayette was the namesake for a lot of those places. And so it's whether it's Fayette County or Fayetteville or a Lafayette City. Well, the funny thing is, when I was looking into that and thinking, okay, I heard Lauren Coleman say this, and then I looked at the Beast of Bray Road. Well, the Beast of Bray Road is known to happen in Elkhorn, Wisconsin. But if you actually zoom in to the actual municipality that that land is located on, it's in Lafayette, Wisconsin. So it was
Wow.
like, oh, rings that bell again, right? So
Crazy.
Palmyra, Lafayette, Fayette, whatever it is, that name game, it definitely rings a bell. So I'm not sure what to make of that, but it's something that definitely gets your attention.
Yeah, it really does. And what a and tales of strange falls from the sky are always interesting. I think I read, and I forgot to grab it, but there's a town in Kentucky that celebrates a mysterious meat fall. Did you read about that? Just had its like
Yeah,
its annual
actually, so
celebration.
what got me thinking about this is they had forgive me for not remembering the exact town in Kentucky, but they had the Kentucky meat shower, and it happened, I believe, March 3rd, exactly 150 years ago. So they actually had a festival that commemorated the 150th anniversary, and they had some kind of contraption wired up, and they actually made meat fall from the sky. I'm not sure exactly how they did that, but it seemed like a lot of things in Wisconsin, another excuse to have a festival or party. In Wisconsin, we probably drink a lot of beer. I imagine in Kentucky, it's probably bourbon and beer.
Apparently, it was in, the name of the county. I just pulled up the article here. It was Bath County on yeah, on late Saturday afternoon earlier this month, so it would have been, yeah, Mar the story is dated March 40th, March 4, and it was 150 years later after
Mhm.
meat fell from the sky, and I think it was a light airplane dropped, and they'd wrapped the meat in plastic bags with, like, little, I think, propeller things sticking out so it wouldn't knock anyone's eye out or something, so it kinda came down like those seeds with propellers on, I'm imagining, it kind of
Nice.
they just
Yeah.
spun down slowly. But it's interesting that, yeah, that I just bumped into that, and the first thing you talk about tonight is another strange
Yeah, the
fall from
Skyfalls were definitely, something that Charles Ford liked to point out. What
yeah,
was the origin of them? He thought maybe that there was a vast ocean that actually lived in the atmospheric, above the clouds
right.
of our Earth. So the next one I have, is also kind of a skyfall. In October of 1881, a shower of spider webs befell much of Wisconsin. According to a newspaper report, the webs seemed to come from over the lake. This would have been Lake Michigan, and could be seen a distance of 50 feet, filling the air. They This is kind of clunky writing by the newspaper. Filling the air, as they were gently wafted to and fro. Reported to have fallen on Milwaukee, the Cream City wasn't alone. At Green Bay, the fall was the same, coming from the direction of the bay. Only the webs varied from 60 feet in length to mere specks. The spiderweb fall was reported among citizens of Sheboygan and Ozaki as well. The purported webs were strong in texture and very white. Now, was this a web spun by a clutter of aerial spiders weaving a web over Lake Michigan? Fortunately for the arachnophobic, no spiders were seen with the floating filaments. So, just these weird spider web like filaments fell in
Weird.
Wisconsin in 1881, and nobody knows what to make of that to this day.
That makes me think of angel hair, which used to be reported with maybe dropping from UFOs or with UFO sightings, a strange wispy kind of almost silver material, which I think eventually would disintegrate. We had a
Yes.
thing that where I lived in Australia in the northern suburbs of Sydney, one year during my college years, that suburb overnight it seemed, and I'm sure it's happened other times, but in my life at time living there, I'd lived there for, at that age in my 20s, probably the better part of my life. There was a spider plague and a web spider plague. Like it was in the fall, and um, all of a sudden, you know what? Maybe it was in the winter into the spring. It was either the fall into the winter or the winter into the spring. All of a sudden, there were big, massive spider webs everywhere with big web spinning spiders. And it wasn't just here or there. It was like if you walk between my town and like on my where I lived and to the store or the stores, the little kind of village store community, which is probably about 10 to 15-minute walk, you didn't see one or two. You saw literally hundreds. They were everywhere. It was the weirdest thing. Now, I'm
Wow.
sure there was some explanation that, that year the spiders had, maybe it's a cyclical thing and every 50 years there's a bunch of them born or something, but I'd never seen anything like it in my life.
Yeah, that's wild. If you had arachnophobia or hated spiders, I could only imagine you'd be afraid to leave your house.
It was
And
like a horror movie. It was
yeah,
nuts.
I have another story coming up in a couple slides. Not spiders, but another curious. And there's a rational explanation, but it's a fun story, so I want to share it with you. I'll move on to the next one here. And this is on the afternoon of March 30th, 1886. A phenomenon was witnessed by the people of the Fox River Valley. And this would be specifically Oshkosh. The townspeople of Oshkosh reported a sudden darkness that settled in the span of 5 minutes, where it was dark as midnight. The darkness lasted from 8 to 10 minutes When it slowly passed by, the air was reported as being still, while the rolling darkness passed from west to east. Now, the Wisconsin State Journal, that's the Madison paper still to this day, said it seemed to be a wave of total darkness passing along without wind. So it wasn't just a normal weather phenomenon, something that people of 1886 were more in tune with the weather or being outside or observing this. So it was notable enough to make it to the Madison newspaper for publication. And again, 8 to 10 minutes of pure black, like it was midnight. They were well aware of solar eclipses then. Um, no solar eclipse was reported on this date, or that's something that's well documented, but we're not sure what to make of that. And if it would have been just Oshkosh, nowhere else.
How strange. Good work on Chad for digging all this stuff out, and good work on you for sharing it with us.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Chad dug this one out. I know I grabbed
Oh,
a
okay.
couple from him, but I definitely recommend his book. It's just so you can dive deeper. And there's a psychic phenomenon, um, UFOs, ghosts, everything in there that he was able to compile. So definitely recommend that book, Hidden Headlines of Wisconsin.
Well, good work on you
So
finding frogs.
yeah,
Fantastic.
yeah. So you mentioned the spider webs. Well, we're going to talk about frogs, and this was in 1952. It said that Wisconsin suffered a flood of frogs in just a 48-hour period, the lakeshore town of Oconto. So this would be, um, so if you look at Wisconsin on a map, we got that fun little thumb. That thumb is Door County. Now, right at the crook of that thumb is Green Bay. Now, going up the opposite crook of that little bay, the Green Bay, is Oconto. So that's right where this happened. So it's a lakeshore community still on Lake Michigan, but on Green Bay. So just in an 48-hour period, the lakeshore town of Oconto was stricken with 175 million frogs. Now, this made it so far as even to New York City, where the New Yorker picked this up, where they chronicled an Oconto resident where he experienced that he had gone out on his front lawn to have a look around with the flashlight at night and had been confronted by a million shining little eyes. He started towards the backyard and found that he was outflanked. He swung the light around and discovered that the whole house was encircled. Another reported that explosion of an explosion of amphibians beneath the wheels of automobiles at night sounded like rifle fire. Now, did
Goodness.
someone smite Wisconsin with a biblical plague? Now, Lake Michigan was said to have rose early that spring. Like most springs, leopard frogs laid their eggs in nearby marshes. In the most recent years, the waters had receded, killing off many of the unhatched eggs. And then researchers concluded that in 1952, the waters remained high, which allowed more eggs to hatch, resulting in an overabundance of frogs. So, pretty much what they're trying to make there is that on most years they'll lay their eggs, but a lot will be killed off because of the receding waters. But this year, with the water staying high, more hatched out. Now, the upshot for Wisconsin was the unofficial state bird of Wisconsin, the mosquito. It was nearly eradicated in that section of the state that summer. And
Wow.
I imagine that the supper clubs of Wisconsin at that time had the frog leg special on the menu because of the overabundance of these things. Now, have you ever had frog legs?
You know what? I've eaten many things, but there's something to me about frogs and amphibians. I don't know what it is. The idea of eating them is disturbing. Funnily enough, I've eaten a crocodile. That was even a little weird for me because it starts to go into that reptile world, But yeah, now have you had frogs legs though,
I
Chad?
have, yeah. So there's a place in Madison called Tornado Room. Well, it's called Tornado Steakhouse now, affectionately known as Tornado Room to the locals. But they have frog legs on the menu. And one year for my birthday, I went there and I had them as the appetizer, and they're really good.
Tastes like
And
chicken.
a little like chicken, maybe a little gamier, but
Okay.
still good. And there was a place not too far from the Palmer residence called Two Lakes in, it would have been just north of Plainfield. Two Lakes Supper Club, where they were well known for serving these. And my friend's aunt actually owned and operated the restaurant, and she would go gigging for frogs to put on the menu for that night. So you could get the freshest
Oh,
frog
wow.
legs that were harvested that day on Two Lakes menu. I'm not sure if they still serve those or not, but if you're ever out that way doing Palmer research,
Yeah.
stop by Two Lakes. They have some of the best pizza in Wisconsin.
Yeah, I'll have to look at, so it's called Two Lakes. I'll have to see
Two
where
Lakes,
that
Two
is.
Lakes Supper Clubs. It's well known. It's a family owned place. I think it started in the 50s by a couple immigrants, the Porteses and the Jagalos that moved up from the Chicago area and started that
Oh,
restaurant, and it's operated as a family business ever since.
that's how Sam and I have to do a drive for the documentary out there soon. Maybe we can make a
Yeah.
day of it and go and grab, a pizza dinner or something. I'm not sure about the frog's legs. Maybe she'll try them. She might be a little more
Yeah, you
brave
can
than
ask her if she's tried frog legs before.
Yeah.
It's kind of
She's
a
realistic.
Wisconsin classic.
Have you tried Sam, have you tried frog's legs? If you have, drop it in the comments and I'll share. Oh, this looks cool, Jeff. What's this?
So this is actually a recent one here, and there might be a natural explanation for this, but I'll let you decide. And this is on the morning of Tuesday, May 25th, 2021. So really recent. A resident in Elk Mound was greeted by something extraterrestrial. That morning, Ken Millerman had just returned from taking his daughter to school when a large chunk of ice came crashing through his bedroom ceiling. It missed Millerman by a mere 4 inches. The ice basketball weighed in at over 12 pounds and was estimated to have traveled at over 150 miles per hour. And you can see it left a pretty big hole in his roof. And fortunately for
Gosh.
Millerman, he was not struck. Now, meteorologists, they dismiss the rock as a hailstone because hailstones are formed in the atmosphere and fall to earth in spheres. So I think it was Kankakee, Illinois, just got hit by an ice storm, and there was pictures floating around like baseball to softball sized hailstones. But this was actually 12 pounds, uh, and it was in a irregular shape. It wasn't in that spherical shape like a lot of those hailstones. Now, it's not known yet what the ice boulder hailed from. Now, this isn't the first time inexplicable things drop from the sky in Wisconsin. Of course, we talked about the shower of worms in Palmyra, but this one may have a terrestrial explanation. Now, I have a friend who has an interesting background. He was a meteorologist, he was a TV weatherman for a time here in Madison, but he was also in the Air National Guard, and then he was also active in the military. So he knows a lot about aviation as well as meteorological phenomenon. So I sent this story to him and I said, Carlos, what do you think this was? Now, his best guess was that it was an ice dam that was created by a high flying plane, specifically around the landing gear. He thought that maybe there was a an arm or a strut around where the landing gear came out, and ice formed out, and unfortunately it built up enough and broke off and fell on this guy's house. But I'll let your I'll let your audience decide what they think was the cause of this. But a 12-pound ice basketball coming through your roof. I mean, I don't know how you sleep sound after hearing that story ever again.
It's like something out of Donnie Darko, for goodness sakes.
That's wild.
Now, Sam did get back to us and she said she hasn't eaten them, but she bartended where they served them. I didn't know they were a thing in Wisconsin, but apparently if Sam served at a bar where they had them, and you said the place that was at Twin Lakes, is that what it was called?
Two Lakes, yeah.
Two Lakes. Two
Two
Lakes.
Lakes. I believe it's Almond or just north of Plainfield, somewhere around there, kind of out in the country, but definitely a destination. An old timey Wisconsin supper club. Can't recommend it enough.
We had Horace before, Smith. I don't know if I can go back and find the comment, but it was worth mentioning. I think you said that wormfall originally was at 1897, And he said that's around, of course, the time the great airships were seen. So
That
maybe,
was so that was the worm shower, 1897. Yes,
yeah,
so that would
that's
have been the kickoff of the airships. I think, yeah, the airships probably started in April of 1897 as well.
yeah, isn't
So
that
could there
strange?
be a correlation? I think they really came through Chicago, Milwaukee, Madison in, I think, May or June. It was closer to the summer months
Maybe they
of
were
that.
throwing like chum overboard the way fishermen do.
Yeah.
I didn't see
Anything
that
is
half the chance.
possible. Yes, in the weird and bizarre world.
Just, just that just fantastic stories too, Jeff. My
Yeah, so
goodness,
that was just a smattering that I was able to put together for tonight.
you dig up
Um,
some amazing stuff, my
but
friend.
I wanted to kind of turn it back over to you and see what we talked about, the Kentucky meat shower. What is your favorite of the Fortean? Not something that you can pigeonhole into, UFOs or ghosts, but something that's, just above the normal.
As far as falls or just general Fortean
Just
phenomena.
general Fortean phenomenon.
I think Fort first wrote about teleportation. I think he coined the term actually teleportation. And I think it's interesting. And historically, there were a number of cases. And I think a number of them are in Kill's books, but there's others where people would be, I don't know, in Europe somewhere or in South America somewhere. And this is before there was air travel. And they just find themselves somehow on a continent on the other side of the world. Or
Yeah, I
people just
heard.
disappearing, people just walking along and poof, disappear. And we know some of those now. There was a famous one about a man who just disappeared, which we now know in a field in front of people or something, which we now know is just apocrypha, that it wasn't real. But there's plenty of other reports, enough for our fort to have actually, gone and coined a term for it, where people seem to, or objects as well, seem to be here and then they seem to be there. And I think I remember it might have been Carl Sagan in one of his books saying it isn't actually beyond our understanding of physics that one day your car could, for example, melt through your garage door somehow and appear on the other side. It would be a serious anomaly, but it's not beyond. So I wonder if some of these things, even though anybody who listens knows my very small amount of faith that I have in modern science, but perhaps some of these things could be explained by science. I'm like Fort. I don't think they ever will. But my point is, those things to me are interesting. Mysterious appearances and disappearances, or apparitions. Just not even necessarily apparitions. Physical things coming and going.
Yeah,
Very
the apports. I know a
apports,
lot of
yeah,
this. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. I know. Was it the skull experiment where they had encountered that? I believe where things were coming and going.
It rings a bell. Speaking of
Yeah.
experiments and speaking of Fortean phenomenon, are you aware of the study called the Finup experiment back in the
Hmm. And that was a
1970s?
Canadian from, was that the 80s or 90s
1970s originally, I
or
think,
70s?
actually.
Okay.
Yeah. And anyway, this group of, I don't know, with quasi-academics, or they're academics or whatever, I can't even remember now, but they decided they would see if they could manifest an intelligence which they just kind of that they kind of just made up. And if they could do traditional spiritual things, like I guess table tapping or Ouija boards or whatever, and bring this intelligence through. And they created this backstory for the intelligence. They gave it a name, Philip, and lo and behold, this thing came through. Now that it begs a lot of questions then about the nature of the paranormal and the nature of various entities. But we played a film. We did the world premiere this weekend at Midwest Weird Fest, a film called The Philip Experiment, which is a fantastic found footage movie, but it starts out in an historical journey talking about the Philip experiment. So people should keep an eye out for that film on the fest circuit, because I think it'll have legs. I don't think we're going to be the first and the last festival that plays out. But anyway, about the Philip experiment, I think things like that are fascinating because they question not just the nature of our reality, perhaps, as all paranormal phenomena or all Fortean phenomena seems to do, but it starts to question our interpretations of said phenomena. Like if the popular interpretation for when you're doing table tapping or a seance or playing with a Ouija board is that you're contacting some kind of spirit from the other world and it has its own personality and it's whatever it is. But if you can imagine that's the creature's personality first, or the entity's personality first, and give it a back history or backstory, and then that thing comes through, I mean, it's something that I think people in our space should pay more attention to, because it can suggest a number of things. One of the things, of course, is that somehow all of these things we encounter, at least these spiritual things we encounter, are somehow our own projections or somehow creations of our own, individual consciousness or group consciousness or collective consciousness. It also might suggest that these things pick up on what we're expecting and reflect it back to us. Like the actual mechanism, I don't think anybody can explain, but something like the Finup experiment indicates that things like seances might not just be as simple as you're contacting the dear departed, that is, you're just talking to the ghost of your great aunt Ethel, who roams the back corridors of the family estate, or some other historical ghost. That maybe whatever these things are, they're presenting as how we expect them to present, or we're creating them whole cloth out of our own psychic, projection powers. I don't even know what the mechanism is, but the Finup experiment, things like that suggest that that the anomalous isn't often what we think it is. It is a truly anomalous.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the beauty of it. I think a lot of us came into this field really idealistic, thinking, oh, we're going to be able to solve this. We're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to capture Bigfoot, or we're going to well document these UFOs and really understand the mechanism behind it. But I think the mystery is really the purpose in a lot of these things. And I think just kind of leaning into that and realizing that, um, we're mere mortals. We're going to be here, 80, 90 years on this earth if we're lucky, and being able to just experience what we have in the moment. And maybe there's not an explanation. Maybe there is going to be some of those answers on the other side. I'm not sure, but I think that's what keeps me going is just leaning into the mystery and just embracing it and realizing I'm not going to figure it out. I may put some theories together, read up on some of those Philip experiments, people that are smarter than me that definitely conducted, but really just letting the mystery wash over me, for lack of a better term.
No, I think that's really the only approach we can take. I think there's so many people in our field who want to try to give the answers and claim that they know the answers. Whether
Yeah.
it's, when I say our field, I mean the broader Fortean world, whether it's ufology or specter hunting or cryptozoology, and nobody really knows anything. That's the base reality. We've got nothing we can actually cling to. Some people might even have their own experiences, but I think we have to be very careful gauging the experience by what the actual experience presented itself as. That doesn't mean you have to doubt that the person had something genuinely exterior to them seem to happen. And it doesn't mean that the person's lying, but I think we do have to question if what they experienced had a reality that was what was presented to them. Because if you go to the movies and I'm stealing this from Jacques Vallée, but if you go to the movies and you're watching something on the screen and it's a fantastic action movie, it's a war movie or something, right? You're not really watching a war. You're being subjected to a presentation of sound through the speakers and visuals through the screen, and all the technology is being operated from a projection booth behind you. And if you go in and then you experience a love story, the war story might have thrilled you or made you apprehensive or at the edge of your seat or, whatever. And the love story might make you sad or happy, and you experience these emotions. The technology that was actually presenting it to you never changed. You were shown a very different image and you heard very different sounds, but the root cause of that isn't a war and isn't a love story. It's a projector behind you that was able to evoke these responses from you by projecting the right combination of sound
Mhm.
and image. And I think that's perhaps, to me, one of the most fantastic allegories for what might be going on when people have an experience with the other or an anomalous experience, that what they're experiencing might not be the root of what's giving them or what's actually interacting with them and making them experience what they're experiencing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that statement. Yeah, I mean, you went there, allegory of the cave. I mean, Plato. Uh, it's been apparent
Exactly.
since then, but also it seems like these phenomenon will come in the form of something that you can relate with. So if you're a Westerner in a Christian country, it may come as something biblical. But if you're in the East, it might come something that is more, pantheistic, or something more in line with, Buddhist or Shinto, or whatever the predominant cultural or religion or belief is from there.
Yeah, I think, and that's what I think might be the value. Spin that a little bit. What that might be the value of these experiences. So many people want to get to the root of the experience. Some people think they already have. Well, we know Bigfoot's, an undiscovered American primate, or we know the
Mhm.
aliens are coming from Zeta Reticula to harvest, our genetics, or we know whatever. But if you get too involved, your focus in the belief systems, your focus becomes on trying to prove what you already believe, or what the book you read already believe, and you become focused on what we can find out about the phenomena, or the phenomenon, depending whether we're
Mhm.
talking about just one phenomenon, or whether we're talking about the broader scope, which I think we are. But the more I'm interested in this, and the more I think about it, the more I think the phenomena can probably teach us far more about us than we can ever learn about it. Like, it can teach us far more about our reactions to the other. It can teach us far more about what we're obsessed with culturally at the time. It can maybe even tell us far more about the subjective nature of our reality, and the inability for us to box it into the neat little boxes that science would like us to put everyday reality.
Mhm.
And it
Yeah.
might ultimately teach us that there's something above and beyond and more important than our 9 to 5 job and commute to and from the office and watching Netflix on the weekend while we stuff ourselves with Doritos or whatever, right? There might be something bigger than this material trap which so many of us have found ourselves in. So I think to just focus on, "Oh, what is it?" I think it can tell us more about us and the nature of reality than we're ever going to be able to discover what it is. There's more
Yeah, I think
important things there,
I
I think.
think what is it is, yeah, it's the wrong question.
Yeah.
Maybe why?
That's a
Why
that's a much
why
better
yeah, why me? And
much better
and
question.
the phenomenon is like, you think about it, it's like people that see UFOs, is it like because they stepped out of their house at 2 a.m. to have a cigarette, that they saw it, and that they just so happened to see it? Or was it something more? Was it there waiting for them? Is it something that they projected into the reality? And those are some of the big questions that I like to ask myself.
Yeah, me too. And is the person who stepped out maybe more likely to have an experience? So there's some of us that are more likely to have encounters? And that's something Keel, I think, recognized when he started to be more sensible in his questions that he presented to witnesses than like MUFON, or, the BFRO didn't exist back then, but whatever the cryptid people were there, he would ask questions like, "What else strange has happened to you? Have you had any other strange
Mhm.
experiences other than the UFO sighting you're telling me about?" And people go, "Yeah, it's funny. There was this weird invisible presence moving around my house," or whatever. There often these people would seem to be repeat experiences, or the phenomenon presented itself to them as different phenomena, but it seemed to be related. And they're questions that I still don't think are brought up perhaps as widely as they can be. Although today I have noticed in the disclosure movement that there seems to be, and I don't even know if the mainstream has really caught up with it yet, but certainly many of the key players, and I've talked about this many times, many of the key players in the disclosure movement, including the key journalist figures who've popularized it, they seem to suggest again and again that this isn't extraterrestrial, that this is something else. And you get everything from people using terms like interdimensional, to people like Tucker Carlson suggesting it's some type of spiritual evil. But none of these people are saying, "Oh, yeah, it's Zeta Reticuli and a little metal craft coming from, another star system." They all say it's something far more complicated. So I think maybe ufology, which has always been my wheelhouse, is pushing ahead of some of these other fields, is looking at this phenomenon as more complicated than the original popular interpretations within the community wanted it to be. In other words, little green man in tin cans from another planet, right? There
Mhm.
seems to be people and I'm not even saying that I don't even trust the disclosure movement necessarily. When I say that, I don't think we're gonna get a real proper disclosure because, frankly, I don't think any government has a real disclosure to give us. But I'm impressed at least to see the people who are knocking on the door the hardest and making the most noise, saying that this doesn't seem to just be extraterrestrial. It seems to be far more complicated.
Yeah, and I would totally agree with those sentiments. So it sounds like you need to brush off that old dissertation and add an appendix or addendum or a revision to it on the what was the title? The History of American UFO Belief.
Yeah, Flying Saucer Culture and Historical Survey of American UFO Belief.
Yeah.
It's funnily enough, I have been redrafting it for a number of years, and then, when I say redrafting, I mean there's maybe only 20-30% of the original left, but the man who invented flying saucers took me away from all of that. The feature documentary grabbed me and the book got shelved essentially, but it's there, it does deal with a lot more of this type of stuff, and one day I'll finish it. It won't be till after the feature, but
Yeah, and
one day I'll
I
finish it.
don't think it's time for you to finish that anyway, because I think over the next few years we're going to learn a lot more about the phenomenon and what's actually happening. Like you said, I don't have any faith that the quote unquote disclosure movement is going to create any new ground, but it's probably going to create new mythos in this, and that's something that definitely you can key into with your scholarship and the history that you've already compiled, and then probably just do an analysis of where it started and where we are today. But it's an ever evolving thing, and I like you said, I don't think we're ever going to get to the real bottom of it or have true disclosure.
Well, thanks for the kind words about, my thesis, but what do you think is the most interesting thing going on in the broader Fortean world today regarding research? You mentioned the CE5 stuff. That seems to be something which has caught your attention a little bit.
Yeah, and Barnaby had suggested it and said, "Hey, why don't you moderate this panel?" And it's not something I've been kind of, ancillary. I've heard a little bit from Greer. I know he's the one who kind of coined the phrase close encounters of the fifth kind, specifically CE5, or at least popularized it. But I haven't really looked into it. Um, I'm really curious about the modalities of that and what the experiencers are thinking that they are experiencing and what gives them that idea. I think that's the bigger questions I have. I haven't drawn any conclusions from that. It's not something that specifically I would like to dabble in as far as having my own encounter. I know uh, previous guest and friend of the show, Ian Steven, has done some. Um, he's done some experiences with Zach and wanted to document what he had encountered. But as far as the conclusions go, I'm really waiting for that show in May and just being able to kind of be in the moment to hear it unbiased, and see what these gentlemen that have experienced the phenomenon have to say about it.
Well, you're very balanced, Jeff. You're one of the most balanced people in the entire space, so I think it was a wise decision to have you, because I think you're chairing that kind of panel. Is that how it's working?
Yeah,
Or
I'll moderate the panel. Yeah.
right. I think that's a good choice. I'm fascinated as well. I don't know if I'll get to it. I'd love to get along, but I'm kind of limited in my traveling with my daughter and my finances. So it's always like, what can I get to and what can't I get to? So,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
always
And
the way.
as far as that goes, it's like I've had ideas about this stuff ever since I was a little kid. So, and I've had, things have evolved, they've changed. I've gone back to the same thing. So it's really hard for me to not just kind of have a karate stance and be like, I'm not going to jump to a specific conclusion. I'm going to hear everything and use some kind of discernment to come up with what best works for me. But to think that I have the answers, I've moved beyond that probably after I turned 40, realizing that, it's more fun to just sit in the mystery of it.
Do you have an approach other than obviously being kind and understanding, but do you have an approach when you're having a conversation with somebody who is 100% they know the answer to any of these things? Like, what kind of position do you take, or how do you deal when you're talking with somebody who's assertive and certain that they're right?
I usually like to ask them, what brought them to that conclusion, or what was their line of thinking, or what who are some experts on this topic that have informed your worldview? And then I can kind of suss out. If they say Lou Elizondo and Age of Disclosure, I'm just going to be like, oh man. It's like when it's something that is so publicized and so well funded and so well produced, I have a hard time accepting that that is the whole story or even the true story.
Yeah, it's become a real problem. And I think the problem is, you kind of pointed at it then, is that there's an ahistoricity to a lot of this analysis now. Like, people are happy just to read, a New York Times article and then follow some of the news after and hear what Elizondo has to say, or watch the new documentary and think they really have a kind of a handle on it. But you can't understand, and this isn't just about the UFO field, which happens to be my wheelhouse. It's about anything, really.
Mm, mm,
You can't. I think it's naive to even attempt to draw a conclusion based on just a modern, current interpretation of something if you are not aware of the history behind the belief system or the social movement or the organization or whatever. Like, to talk about UFOs today and not to talk about Ray Palmer, for example, who's
mm.
obviously my favorite character, or not to talk about George Adamski, or not to talk about, any of the earlier contactees, or not to talk about any of the skeptics writing back then, or not to talk about the early science fiction, and not to look at, covers where we first started seeing flying saucers and pulp magazines, or not to read science fiction even before that talked about these, craft, or not to see how did our concept of the alien evolve, and what were the encounter cases like in the 1950s as opposed to in the 1970s, as opposed to, the 1990s. Like, if you just look at the current interpretation, particularly in the anomalous, again, it's ridiculous to do it anyway, but particularly in this space where things shift and change and there seems to be a ridiculous amount of our own input into what we're experiencing. And then to think the solution because you've been tracking it since 2017 and you haven't gone
Yeah.
back and looked,
Yeah.
then
No,
the
and I think
naivete.
that's where your work is really important, um, in really documenting that. Like, where did these beliefs start? I mean, obviously, Jacques Vallée has definitely inspired both of us as far as
Absolutely,
his thinking on this and how
absolutely,
far back his research goes on this, and then to the more modern stuff from the space age, the atomic age, on forward, and then not to discount things like the Paul Benowitz affair with Richard Doty and the Mirage Men,
absolutely.
and not bringing that into light, saying, "Okay, we have been deceived before. Here is the official." And then thinking and looking at this new age of disclosure and not realizing that there was other spurious characters like Donald Kehoe in the past, and not taking, because obviously you've been in this long enough and you've researched this deep enough to know that certain patterns start forming again that have been historically documented, and being able to take that knowledge from those previous stories or previous eras of study and kind of mix and match, compare and contrast to what's going on now, and being able to take more a neutral approach to what is being quote unquote disclosed.
Absolutely. We have a fun comment from Horace Smith, who's made a number of comments tonight. He's the professor emeritus of physics and astronomy at Michigan State University, a good friend of mine, a good friend of the show. He's been on the show in the past. And he says, sometimes it seems as though UFO researchers of the 1950s were having more fun than their more recent counterparts. It's certainly more interesting. Like, the books of the 50s and 60s and 70s are certainly more interesting than what's put out today.
Yeah, I love that comment, Horace.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. It seems like there are a lot of people who are so invested, either monetarily or psychologically, with a specific outcome in this field. And anything that drops into the Jacques Vallée or the Kilian camp is automatically dismissed as woo-woo or crackpot. But when we're talking about something that's, it's ineffable. It's almost incomprehensible what the phenomenon that's being experienced.
Yeah, and Flat Rockland said UAPs are killing off flying saucers, Dean. You were doing your part to keep the saucer law in the zeitgeist. Well, I mean, yeah, the saucer law is so much better than the UAP nonsense. The UAP nonsense instantly assumes the government knows everything, which was always a problem. And I think the people who are conscious, and when you talk to older ufologists who were around then, like people like Alan Greenfield and Rick Hilberg and Gene Steinberg, they kind of understand we're never going to get the answers. You know what I mean? They also understand that the government doesn't know the answers because they've been tracking it long enough and deep in it long enough. It's every wave, every new generation's like, we're going to knock on that government door hard enough and they're going to give us the answers. Like, there's no answers there to give. They don't know anything. They know that the Tic Tacs were probably theirs, or probably some test on naval pilots to see what they were doing. That's clearly what was probably going on there, right? Quite clear. I mean, I'm assuming that I know, but there seems those kind of stories, I think you can fit within a bubble of the military might know what's going on one way or another. But
it seems as well, if Graeber was able to come public with that, there had to have been a controlled release of that information.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But it's easy to imagine that that's, maybe US technology or some US psyop. But then when you start to talk to people who've had ongoing years of strange encounters, maybe dating, back in the 40s or 50s, you start to go, this doesn't seem to be the same phenomenon as this. I mean, we want to tie them together, but, a little gray man appearing at the end of your bed or, any entity in your bedroom, people want to tie in with the same thing as, a crop circle, and the same thing as a light in the sky in the distance, is the same thing as a UAP video, is the same thing as, a park craft with little men dancing around in the field at night. But I'm not sure how we can just assume all of these things are part of the same package anyway. They're not necessarily the same thing, but we tend to assume that they are. I mean, one might be Venus, one might be swamp gas, one might be night terrors, one might be a US government secret, project. The other one might be something genuinely anomalous, which is, interdimensional or spiritual, and Lord knows what it is, but they mightn't all be the same thing. But the problem is we want to bunch everything and make everything kind of easier, in all of our little groups.
The unified field theory of the paranormal. Yeah.
But anyway, this has been a fantastic conversation. Have you written something since this wonderful book? Because I always encourage people with children to buy it, Wisconsin Legends for Kids. If not, talk a little bit about this book, Jeff.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. Yeah. So this was Wisconsin Legends for Kids. I put it out about 2 years ago. It was inspired by my daughter and our walks to school, where she would ask me about the legends of Wisconsin because she knew I had an interest in these things, and wrote a lot about it. And she said, Dad, when are you going to put together that book? Now, she was expecting me to maybe print out a couple pages and maybe find a couple pictures and just show her like a quick flip book. But I did something a little bit better. Hopped on Kindle Direct Publishing and was able to churn this out for her. And it's filled with 10 legends from Wisconsin. And it's targeted for, I didn't want to make them too scary, and I also didn't want to make them too simplistic. So I think early readers, probably 7 to 9, will get the most kick out of this. I know my son, when he was 5, he picked it up and he liked a lot of the stories, whether it was the Beast of Bray Road, the Pancakes from Outer Space, one of the all-time favorites, the Ridgeway Ghost, and then something a little sweeter, the Legend of the Ice Cream Sundae. So if you got a kid in your life, in a Wisconsinite, definitely grab this for them. It's available on Amazon. It's $10, no shipping. Dean will put the link in the show notes. And I appreciate you bringing this up, Dean.
Of course, man. And they are in the show notes now. And so anybody, whether you're watching on YouTube or whether you're listening on the many, podcast platforms that we go out on, you should just be able to scroll down and find the link to the book. And again, my daughter loves this book. My girlfriend's kid loves this book. My girlfriend's kid's friend loves this book. So anybody I've recommended to, really dig it. It's great. You really should get it if you want to introduce your children to this, or if they're interested in it, either way. Well, Jeff, man, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show. It's always an incredible delight to get to talk to you.
Likewise, Dean. Thanks so much for your time tonight.
Man, thank you for your time. And until I get to talk to you again, Jeff, which hopefully will be very soon, we should hang out more than we do, given that we're both in this state. And until I get to talk to everybody else out there, which will be same weird time, 9 p.m. Central next Thursday, same weird network, the Untold Radio Network, please keep it weird.